we was in the mortar platoon, and the rifle companies, we made several attacks through around when we were capturing Con, and had lots of firing, and that's one reason that I can't hear anything today, because my left ear was just within 1.5 feet of the muzzle of the mortar, and the primary charge of a 3-inch mortar shell is a 12-gauge shotgun shell, 12-gauge blank filled with powder, and then around in the fins of the mortar bomb is little plastic charges of powder, and it was it really made a noise when it go off, and it was just right by my ear. And a lot of times of a morning, if any time that I would sleep and lay on my side, for my left ear, there'd be a spot of bloody pus where my ears, I know my eardrum was busted, but my ears had, any number 2 on the mortar's ears run. There was no, we were issued little hearing protectors, but we couldn't wear them, because if you put one of them in, you couldn't hear any orders or anything else, so we just took it. That's all there was to it. And they captured Con, and we stayed around for a while, and went into attacks one place and another, and I don't remember any particular. I remember one little garden we were in France, and we set the mortar up in an onion patch, and the mortar base plate was probably 2 feet by 2 feet, steel plate like, and the barrel set down in that, and if the ground was anything like soft, you'd have to keep adjusting your sight, because that base would settle down, and that'd make the barrel elevated more, and the more the barrel was elevated, the closer the bombs were falling. If we had to shoot so many 100 yards in front of us, why, after several shots and the base plate went down and the barrel elevated, we would be firing several 100 yards short. So we'd have to keep adjusting, letting the barrel down all the time. And I can remember that one garden that we were in, whenever the mortar would go off, the ground was soft enough in that garden that it'd jerk, and it got till it was almost funny, because onions would keep popping up out of the ground whenever the mortar would go off and the ground would shake like that. You'd see an onion pop up. But I can remember that real well. But we were then supposed to close, or go down and help close the town of Falaise. The German army was trying to get away from us, and the Americans had made a big advance. They broke out of the hedgerows, and we were supposed to go down and
I just died.
yeah?
I just died.
Okay, shut her off everything, and we'll continue some. Do you need more light, or?
Nope, that's good. We bought one of them today, a little camcorder.
Yeah.
Yep, we did. That old one we got's a dinosaur. So,
We're ready. Is it ready?
Yep.
Whenever we got the Falaise Gap shut off, captured the town of Falaise,
Turn that down. That's good.
we, the Germans had been trying to get out through that gap at Falaise, and the roads were just bumper to bumper traffic, vehicles, trucks, tanks, half tracks, all kinds of mechanical vehicles, and wagons, horse-drawn wagons. The roads around there, most of them were sunken roads. They on each side of the road there was a bank anywhere from 3 to 6 or 8 feet high, and they were down in there just lined up trying to get away. And the Air Force, the 3 Air Forces, British, Canadian, and American Air Forces, caught them in them roadways and bombed and strafed, and they were just absolutely full of wrecked vehicles, dead men, dead horses. It was just unbelievable at that time, and now it's just unimaginable. And there was a lot of horses. This was maybe 24 hours, or well, it was at least 24 hours after we captured the town, that I went out into some of the roadways, and there was still a lot of horses that were not killed, but a lot of them were shot up bad, or with shrapnel or something like that, and they were tangled up in their harness and wagons and everything else that was there, clogged in that roadway, and they couldn't get away. They couldn't get loose. There was a lot of them dead, and a lot of them that just would have died. And I went down this one road with my .38 Smith & Wesson and shot crippled horses that I knew wouldn't survive. The ones that I thought could live, I'd try to cut the harness on them or untangle them something till they could get loose. But the others that couldn't do anything, I'd just shoot them just to put them out of their misery. Because a lot of them had legs blown off and guts hanging out, and just, well, it's just unimaginable. You just can't imagine anything like that. And they had pretty well picked up. I don't know whether the Germans, probably not. I'd say it was the Allied. The Americans came in on one side of the town and we were on the other. And there, the stretcher bearers for the armies had gone out and picked, there wasn't any crippled, wounded humans out there now. All the humans that were there were dead soldiers, and there was hundreds and hundreds of them, along with everything else on in the road and where they'd been trying to climb up the bank. I suppose a certain amount of them did climb up the roadsides and got away from the strafing and everything. I'm sure they did. And the fields around between the roads were, there was just hundreds of abandoned vehicles that had run out of gas or diesel fuel, whichever they might have used, and they just drove them as far as they could, and when they stopped, they took off on foot. Some of them made it, I'm sure, and a lot of them didn't. But we got German motorcycles, sidecars, and the little, I can't remember what they called them, probably couldn't pronounce it anyway, but they had a motorcycle front end, handlebars and a wheel, and tracks, little tracks on each side. There was a motorcycle half track, what I guess what it all boiled down to. They would hold about, depending on how big the men were and how much equipment they had on, they'd hold 4 to 6 men and the driver. And we had gasoline, all we needed or whatever, and we'd take a can of gas and go out and get those things and just wreck them, just tear them up, just to be doing and nothing else to do really after we had got to town. And looking through the wagons, and our mortar section in 3 days there found 2 wagons that belonged to German paymasters, regimental or divisional, whatever, paymasters. And I found one myself, and they had all kinds of records in them, and a lockbox that didn't amount to very much, full of French money, good French money. I mean, it was legal tender, and we divided it up. And at one time, the mortar platoon, every man had the equivalent of a little more than $17,000 that we had found in those 2 paymaster wagons. And there was, I didn't know it, and a lot of other people didn't know it, but some of the people found out that they could send that money home, go someplace where the war had tore up the town or something, and go to a bank or post office or whatever, and send that money home, and or they could send, however they did it, they could send so many francs, and whenever it got back to Canada, it would be changed into Canadian money. Anyway, there was a few of them, very few, but one, then the French government shut that down. They wouldn't let that be done anymore. I guess maybe the American forces and the British forces had found money too, and they were sending too much money out of France. It was the German forces paid their men, since they were in France, they paid them in French money. And they were sending too much of it out, so they shut that down. And one fella I knew that had worked in a jewelry store, and new valuable gems and everything like that. Went to a town, I don't know how far away, but found towns that hadn't been destroyed. They were open for business as usual, and he found a jewelry store, and they had a lot of uncut diamonds in their safes there, and he knew all that kind of stuff, and he took his money, 17,000 some dollars, and bought that many uncut diamonds, which was a pretty good handful, and went to a church, cathedral church, whatever, Catholic church outfit, and took a candle, one of the big candles. It was probably 3 to 4 inches in diameter and 5 or 6 inches tall. I don't remember for sure now, but he cut out the bottom of it and took all the wax, whatever it might have been. Candle wax is all I ever knew it to be called. He hollowed out a bunch of it and put those diamonds in it, and then melted that wax and poured it back in the candle and sanded it off, I don't know what, till it didn't show a seam there, and mailed it to his wife back in Canada with instructions that if he lived through the war, if she didn't get any notification that he had been killed, to just keep that candle, and if she received notice, official notice, that he was dead, she was to burn that candle when she was in the house alone, nobody with her, no other person present. She was to burn that candle in his memory, honor, or whatever. And he knew that she was smart enough to know that whenever she burned it and got to that jewels there, the diamonds, which the candle flame wouldn't hurt them one bit, but she would know what it was and what to do with it. And at that time, like $17,000 was a lot of money in 1944. And as far as I know, he was the only one that I ever knew that actually got the money back after the thing was passed that they couldn't send it home. But he got it home because that candle was classified as a souvenir or something like that. But and she had told him to, or he had told her to burn it only after he was dead. And he was probably the only smart one in the regiment. But as far as I know, no one else ever done that. I have no idea. I think maybe he was slightly wounded or something. Anyway, he wasn't with the regiment much longer after that. And I have no idea whether the way he was wounded, it wasn't that bad. Maybe he got to go home and discharged. I don't know whether, I have no idea whether he survived the war for sure and got home or not. But anyway, that's the story for him. And after that, we there was the German 7th Army bottled up there, and there was a few of them, I'm sure, got away, but the rest of them were captured and we had them in a big wire cage for a while until they got them sent to Canada or the United States or England or wherever the prisoner of war, all 3 prisoner of war camps, I'm sure, in Canada and the United States and England. But then there wasn't, this was in August, about, seemed to me like the 20-something of August was when all this took place. And then whenever we started back again, we were pulled back and kind of went up the coast of France and got the channel ports and all that kind of stuff. And finally, wasn't any really big battles. We had battles, of course, and lost men and so forth, but wasn't anything like we had. And then I don't remember too many. Evidently there wasn't any big things went on through September. We just pretty much were marking time and capturing a few little ports and so forth along the coast. Then in October of '44, we were up in Ghent, Belgium, and we got, I don't know, several days, someplace or other around here, I got a letter that Mom had, that I had written to her, and said we were having our first rest, real rest, since D-Day. And we were in Ghent, Belgium, and we were billeted with civilian families. I guess they maybe said in the newspaper or whatever that they were looking for families that had an extra room in their house that could take a couple soldiers, or 3 or 1 or whatever. And carrier driver for one of the other mortar sections and I were billeted in a house with a man and his wife and 4 kids, and they tried to make sure that like myself, that could not speak French, they didn't put me in a house that wouldn't have put me in a house that none of the people spoke English. And I was with a guy, his name was Louis Palais, spelled just like pellet, but it was Palais. He was from Montreal. He was French-Canadian, and he spoke perfect French, and the people that we were billeted with spoke French, and we were there a week or more. I don't remember for sure now. And they were making plans and getting ready to go up into Holland.